Welcome to Pickup Game. I'm Seth Greenberg, and we appreciate you being with us. And as we always start our shows, we need to make sure we thank the people that are most important in right now, and that's our first responders, are the essential workers, the people on the front line that are risking their lives each and every day, the greatest teammates there are, because they are so selfless in this fight against the coronavirus, and they're going in each and every day and making a difference. The doctors, the nurses, the hospital workers, so important. Second thing is please be part of the solution. Put on your mask. Practice social distancing. Be comfortable being uncomfortable. Make good decisions. Decision you make impacts other people. If we're going to fight this virus until there's a vaccine or an antivirus, then we need to be great teammates. We need to be more like our locker rooms. And our locker rooms have great respect for each other. And then finally, understand Black Lives Matter. We need to have greater humanity. We need to have greater compassion. We need to care more, and we need to be better. We just need, as a society, we need to have greater respect. Eliminate any type of stereotypes, whether it's racial, whether it's religious, whether it's professional. Let's have the human decency to respect each other and respect our differences. And with that, I'd like to welcome in Coach Jim Boeheim, Hall of Fame coach, head coach at Syracuse, who's done an incredible job. And in this show, we're going to try to celebrate the lives of John Thompson, Lute Olson. We're going to have Coach Boeheim and PJ Carlesimo will be joining us shortly. But we had you on our podcast yesterday, Coach, and I said, when I say John Thompson, what's the first thing that pops in your mind?
Bigger than life. Great basketball coach, but really more important to the game of basketball, I think, than anybody. Any college basketball coach, I think John Thompson stands at the top of the heap in terms of what he meant to young coaches, and not just young, black coaches, young white coaches, all of the coaches, and young players, black coaches, white coaches. Here's a moment. There's not many moments when we smiled at each other, but I think we're showing a moment on the screen that we did, but at the end, we were very friendly. In the beginning, it was not like that. There was no smiles. And that's, of course, a great ref, Jim Burr. That's the best part of Jim Burr, the back of his head. But here we're smiling. This is after John's retired. This is, I'm sure, the tournament game some plays. But we became great friends, from bitter rivals to great friends, and it's a great story. There's nothing like Syracuse, Georgetown. I know North Carolina, Duke, every fan in the country is going to say that's the biggest rivalry, those fans, Duke and North Carolina fans. But for 20 years when John Thompson was at Georgetown, it was the rivalry, and the best way to find that, how do you find that out? You talk to fans or no, talk to referees that work both games. And, that work North Carolina, Duke, worked Syracuse, Georgetown. And they said, no comparison. Syracuse, Georgetown at that time was the most physical, difficult game to referee you could have. And only the best referees had that game. I always say, you guys really aren't that good. You're just the best of what we have.
What like, if you had to describe John Thompson's team, we understand that they were aggressive and physical and stuff, but what made him such a special coach?
His intensity that his teams brought. He had us against them mentality, and he used that. It was part of his persona to get his teams every edge, every motivational edge. They don't like you, they don't respect you, they're booing you. We have to unite together and fight that. And that's what he did. He was a different person off the court, and after basketball, when he was retired, he was much different. But on the court, his teams came after you the entire game as hard as they could. And if you weren't ready, you would not survive. You would not survive. He really raised the level when you think about it. PJ Carlesimo at Seton Hall, Jim Calhoun at Connecticut, Gary Williams at Boston College, Rick Barnes, Rick Pitino at Providence. All these coaches raised the level of their game, and they became great college coaches, and their programs became great college programs because they had to play up to the level that Georgetown brought to the table. And that's a lot of coaches. And there's other coaches, Jay Wright, Rolly Massimino. You had to bring your team up to his level. And if you didn't, you weren't going to survive. And a lot of those coaches from the Big East, thanks to John and, of course, Dave Gavitt, who started it all, are in the Hall of Fame today because they brought their teams up to the level to compete with John Thompson. And he took a program, remember, from nothing, not from a little bit, from nothing. It's one thing when you take over Kentucky and you win. Well, a lot of people have won at Kentucky. A lot of people have won national championships at Kentucky or North Carolina. When you take over Georgetown, I think they'd won 3 games the year before, but I don't think they'd won any games for a long time. It wasn't just a few years. And you remake that program into really, arguably, for a 3 or 4 year period, it was the best program in the country. I mean, they won one, but Michael Jordan had to hit a really hard shot to stop him one time, and Villanova had to shoot 81% to beat him. The other one, they could have won 3 in a row very easily. But again, he made you play up to a high level, and if you didn't, you wouldn't survive.
How about the era of Big East basketball then? I mean, you had yourself, you had Coach Carlesimo, you had Coach Massimino, you had Coach Thompson. What was the league like? And, you know, I got in the league late into that time period, but like I was so impressed with the league because guys would compete like hell, but the league meetings, there was a tremendous respect. It was almost like a different world from when you were.
It was different.
People. What was the league like then?
It was different. I mean, on the court, those teams got better, and we had 6, 7, 8 teams that could play in the tournament. I think we went when we, I think we won. We were 6th and 5th in the league or something, maybe something like that. And I mean, you could come from 6th, 7th place and get to the Final Four from our league. That's how good it was. I mean, the peaked with 11 teams, I think, going to the tournament one year. The meetings were X-rated. You couldn't come into the meetings. It was just a bunch of guys going after each other and going after the referees and going after the commissioner and anybody else who walked into the room. It was, looking back, it was hilarious. And we did laugh, but there was a lot of near fist fights in those meetings. You can't describe them to people. That's one thing, you had to kind of be there. If you weren't there, you couldn't quite get it.
I mean, it is amazing. I mean, you start thinking about the Big East back then, and it was yourself and Jim Calhoun and Coach Carlesimo and John Thompson and Rolly Massimino and Rick Pitino. I mean, like, it was Coach Gary Williams. It was Hall of Fame coach after Hall of Fame coach after Hall of Fame coach. And yet, does that happen without Georgetown getting good? Does that happen without Dave Gavitt saying, this is what I'm going to do in this moment in time?
Well, nothing happened without Dave Gavitt. He made them all go to big arenas. He made them, he dragged all of us kicking and screaming into this league and got the TV deals with Mike Tranghese, set it all up. He did it. Now, John recruited Patrick Ewing. Louis recruited Chris Mullen. I got Pearl Washington. Eddie Pinckney went to Villanova. We were getting the best players. But those 3 players were pivotal. They came when the ESPN deal came in. They brought us national television. When I went to California recruiting before the Big East, in a high school, a prominent basketball high school, they said, where are you from? What's your name? How do you spell that? They had no clue. When Pearl came here the next year, I went to LAX, the baggage handler looked at me and said, hey, you're Pearl's coach. I mean, transformational. Dave Gavitt, television, and the players that came into our league. And we had Madison Square Garden. We had it Friday, Saturday night, sold out, national television. Every player wanted to play in the Big East. And, Georgetown, Syracuse couldn't get to play, all of them. So they'd go to Seton Hall, they'd go to Pittsburgh, they'd go to Connecticut, and those programs became national programs almost overnight. It was a fluke. It had never happened before, and it'll never happen again. And again, you can't overemphasize John Thompson's impact in Dave Gavitt. I mean, though, if I had to just say two names, those would be the two names that you'd have to say. New York City with Louis, and us having the Carrier Dome was a little factor in that as well. But it was once in a lifetime, and you sound like an old guy saying it'll never happen again. Like I am old, but if I was 25 years old, I'd say that'll never happen again. And you were in the Garden for some of those games.
Yeah.
Or was there?
Unbelievable. It was unbelievable. I mean, like to me, when I was at Pitt, we went from the A10 to the Big East, and it was like a totally different world. I mean, it was like a different universe. And we went back A10 championships. We went into the Big East, and that was Mullen and Ewan, and I think you had Leo Routens.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was ridiculous, and games weren't games; they were events. I mean, I think that was the biggest thing. Like the A10, you play West Virginia, it was a pretty big game. I mean, West Virginia Pitt's a big game. When you had Georgetown and Syracuse and St. John's rolling into the Fieldhouse, they weren't games. They were bigger than life events. I mean, and they were, every place. I mean, you guys were roadshow. Now let me flip it. Lute Olson. What's your recollection of?
Well, I call him the senator. He was like a senator from Central Casting, and unbelievable basketball coach. Details. His teams did everything. They were detailed. His teams were really hard to play against. He built a program again out of very little. Arizona basketball wasn't very well thought of. And all of a sudden, he's dominant. He's dominating the Pac-12 10 at the time. National figure, straight shooter, just a senator. I mean, that's really what he was. When Bobby, his wife, and Luke came into the room, it was, it was really nobody really quite like him in terms of his approach, his persona. Really, his persona was an elder statesman, even when he was young, and just a great basketball coach. I mean, we played against him the first time, I think, was up in Alaska. And Sean Elliott just killed us. And we played him once when he was at Iowa, beat us in a real close game in the Sweet 16. And we were fortunate to win, probably one of the best wins I've ever had. They won the NIT. We were on our way to Alaska. We stopped to play in Arizona. Why? Who scheduled that? I don't know. I didn't, obviously. And we won the game in Tucson. I mean, it was really one of the biggest games we ever won. We won it by, 12 or 15 points. Probably one of the best games we ever played. And
so if you call him the senator, what would you call PJ Carlesimo?
The trash guy. I think he picks up trash in the mornings at some houses because his wife wants him to get out early. So he just goes out and collects trash in the neighborhood, picks up stuff. And, I had the misfortune of rooming with him on golf trips around the world. And he's the only guy that could spoil a trip to Scotland and to Ireland by himself. Oh, there he is. Oh,
there he is.
Didn't know I was talking.
I thought I was on with RJ. You didn't tell me Weasel was going to be on.
You don't need to wear your mask on your video. There's no one there except we don't want to see your face. We would rather put it on. Put it back on.
How's your knee?
Yeah, what happened? Did you walk down the stairs and hurt yourself, huh?
96 swings Monday morning, blew out the versus back. That's what it was.
Oh, you didn't play the whole 18? You quit early?
Only 6 holes.
All right, so John Thompson. I say John Thompson. You say what?
Large father. He was great. He really was. He was misunderstood. I heard Bo talking about Lute a little bit. I think people saw John, barking at the refs and barking at his players. And there was another side to him. He didn't show it to a lot of people, but you used to see it at our spring meetings. He'd be there puffing on his cigar, and he'd have that smile while we'd be fighting about whatever it was, a ball deal or referees or anything. But he was obviously a great coach. I think the thing he did, Seth, may be better, and the three of us tried to do it. Both still doing it, and RJ could speak to this. He took care of his players as well as or better than anybody. I mean, you knew when you were going to Georgetown that you were going to be disciplined for sure, but they were going to go to their classes. They were going to get a degree. They were going to be taught how to behave and a lot of things off the court. And John would look out for him. And that stayed, right to the end. Those guys would call him 10, 20 years later. And not just the obvious, not just Patrick or Zoe or AI, the Dikembe, the great players. I mean, he was that way to his walk-on. So he took care of his guys, I thought, exceptionally well. And he's the kind of guy that, again, the rivalry he had with Jim was as intense a rivalry as there was in college basketball. But he was good when the game was over, shaking hands, or the next time you saw him. I really think he competed at that extremely high level and yet kept things in perspective, which a lot of us didn't do it as well, to be honest with you.
What kind of mentor in terms of Coach Boeheim was talking the other day about how he was not only mentoring his players, he would mentor other coaches. He had time for people.
Well, he always did. And it wasn't just the black coaches, but of course, he had a real soft spot for young black coaches. He was always fighting for coaches to get jobs, get opportunities, whether it was assistant coaches or head coaches. And, again, John was very intelligent, very articulate, could be very persuasive. And when he and Dave Gavin hooked up politically, those two could get anything they wanted done all the time. He put Frank Rienzo, John's longtime AD, in that mix. And they opened a lot of doors for a lot of young coaches. And it's funny, I was reading a quote, I'm going to say his name wrong. He's Mike Tomlin, the Steelers coach. He talked about how growing up, seeing John's success told him he could be successful, gave him the confidence to think that he could accomplish things. And I think that was true of a lot of people. John opened a lot of doors. Sometimes he kicked them down. He could do that if he had to, but he did a lot of good things for a lot of people. He was a great role model.
Yeah, if you look at Coach Thompson, you look at Coach Olson, obviously two different people, but both people centered around their players. Centered around a relationship, because you hear obviously the tributes, and the tributes from the players are absolutely incredible. I asked Jim this, and you guys can go back and forth. You're preparing for Georgetown. All right, I'm going to ask both of you. Give me, all right, 3 things you had to do to have a chance to win. Jim, you go first.
Well, you had to be able to beat their pressure, their defense, their defensive pressure. That was number 1, number 2, and number 3. Defensively, they were okay. They did some things, but it was their defensive pressure. They're going to come after you. If you couldn't stand up and hold up to their defensive pressure, you had absolutely no chance to win. And until your team got tough enough or was tough enough, you developed that toughness. Some teams in our league in the beginning couldn't do it, and then they built the team up to where they could do it. But it was really all about physical and mental pressure on you from the opening, and the game was never over. They played 40 minutes as hard as you can play. A lot of pressure, but they would change defenses. He changed defenses. A lot of people change defenses, but whatever defense he used was a great defense. Usually you have one good defense, another defense not so good, maybe another one that's really not good. But if he pressed you, it was good. If he played man-to-man, it was good. If he zoned you, it was good. And he played 2-3 zone, or he played 1-3-1 zone. And they were all good. He spent a lot of time on defense. But whatever defense Georgetown was in, it was a good one. It was not – there was no deviation from the ability to play defense when they switched defenses. When we switched from our zone to man-to-man, it's not as good. Trust me. Defense, you had to contest, be able to play against his defense.
How about you, Pete?
I hate to agree with Bo, but he's right. The number one thing to me, we were one of those teams that obviously we couldn't match up with Syracuse or Georgetown for a long time when I got to Seton Hall. When we played Georgetown, you had to lace them up. You tell the kids, and the upper class guys knew it, you better be laced up and you better be ready to go for 40 minutes because that defense that Jim talked about, and also their best offense was rebounding. I mean, against zone sometimes, I'm going to say they weren't great zone offense, but their best zone offense was shoot the ball, and then they would just climb all over you on the boards. And I always thought it was a great test each year, the two Georgetown games, to find out how good you were, and particularly your young guys. Okay, guys, you heard about the Big East, and now you're going to find out today, are you going to be able to play for 40 minutes, and are you not going to get intimidated, and you're not going to back down? And what Jim was talking about, they were always that good, honestly. Those two go, head and head. It took us a long time to get to that level where we knew when we played Georgetown, we were going to still be there after 40 minutes. And that, to me, was the first thing. And trying to somehow keep them off the boards was second. The defense was excellent, no question about that.
How about PJ? Just real quickly, you were on the West Coast for a long period of time. I'm sure you probably coached some Lute Olson coached players in your career.
No, the players were great. Steve Kerr, I still see a whole bunch of those guys. Obviously, RJ, I saw Steve Kerr, Tom Tolbert, Bush, all those guys. Sean Elliott was with us for 5 years in San Antonio. I had the same experience that Bo had, but mine wasn't as good. The first time we got to the NCAA, first time in the school's history in '88, our first game in the NCAA was Don Haskins, UTEP. I got UTEP, not Texas Western, but same school, in Pauley Pavilion. And somehow we won that game. And our next game was Lute with Steve Kerr, Sean, the outfielder, who I always forget his name, from the Cleveland Indians. It was a good basketball player.
Tony Clark.
No, a different one. Damn. I think I have it wrong.
Anyhow, Lofton.
Yeah, exactly. Brian Lofton, I think, or some Lofton. We were close. We hung with him for about 15 minutes, and Mark Bryant got his second foul. I took him out, and they opened it up to 14. And I made a mistake, and I put him back in. He got his third foul. They beat us by 100, I think, in our second game in the NCAA. I thought they were going to win the national championship, and they got beat in the semis. It was that Kansas-Oklahoma final. I thought Arizona was the best team in the country, but they didn't win it.
Well, I feel better about myself because we played them in a guarantee game every year because we needed the $90,000 when I was at Long Beach State. My first year, my second game was at Arizona. Brad flies the Blazers at the time. Brad flies in. We have a pretty good team that eventually won at Kansas and won a bunch of games. They were all sophomores that year, and Brad's going, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, I think my guys are pretty good." And he's rolling his eyes in the back of his head. This is like your own brother, just absolutely killing you. Do you understand? You're going to get absolutely drilled. And unfortunately, he was correct. But my favorite thing with Lute is when I was at Long Beach. He was a head coach in high school in Huntington Beach, then Long Beach City College, Long Beach State. So when I was at Long Beach, I was really involved in the Special Olympics, and I had this golf tournament. I called him up one day, and I asked him, I was going to ask him for an auction item. And he goes, "When's your tournament?" And I said, blah, blah, whatever day it was. He goes, I'll come. I go, "You'll come?" He goes, "Yeah, I'll fly in. I'll come." I said, I love Long Beach. He came. He was the first guy there with me. He was the last guy to leave. He took a picture with every single guy that wanted a picture. And every single year after that, he would call me up. He'd go, "You having that golf tournament again?" And he would come every single year.
I tell you, it was a nice man. Again, that's going back, Seth, to Phil Knight and Nike. That's where, you got a chance to play some golf and meet the guys from the other parts. You knew them, but, and you'd see them recruiting or something, but it wasn't the same. When all of a sudden, we got a chance to go together for a week every year. And when he was married to Bobby, I used to look forward to it. I used to bring Bo as my partner because if I wanted to win, I had to have him as my partner. So we could win.
Well, that's for sure, because your game is awful. Who's stuck playing?
I had to play out of my mind to win with PJ as my partner, and it was not.
I did a lot of strokes.
How about a card game and the Nike trip? Phil Knight, Cotton Fitzsimmons, Dean Smith, Lute Olson, John Thompson's
Michael
one.
Michael and Charles.
Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, and PJ, me, Roy Williams some nights, Bobby Kremen some nights. How about that card game?
Wait, how about the self-appointed second commissioner, the biggest pain in the neck to play with, Frieder?
Bill Frieder. Yeah. Those were epic night-long card games. And when Michael played, we played until 4:30 in the morning the first night, and he said, "Jim, we're playing at 7. Golf.
7 a.m. first tee time."
I said, "Oh, okay." So I go down there. I'm there at 6:30. I think, okay, I'm here. I'll be. And the lady says, "Oh, Michael's been hitting balls since 5, and 36 holes." And we did it 3 days in a row. And PJ only made it once. He couldn't make it back. But I'm a glutton for punishment. I played all 3 days, and we played cards. We just played cards till 6:30 in the morning. That way we didn't have to go to bed. But those were epic.
Playing cards with that much money that it really doesn't mean anything is probably not a good move.
Charles lost every hand for the entire 4 hours straight and pulled out 20 grand or something. Says, "You college coaches, you don't have any money."
Once a night he'd make a dumb bet, Seth. Once a night he'd go $3,000. It was, you'd put it whatever you wanted, and everybody knew the chances of him having a good hand were almost nil. Like 6 guys would go, "I'm in." Charles would have like 2 4s or something like that.
Or maybe that might have been a good hand, 2 4s for him.
All right, PJ, tell Jim. All right, you're in the bubble now. You're a part of the bubble. You're watching this thing happen.
JV bubble, though, the media bubble.
All right, I see you up there. I see you up there calling the games. But
yeah.
All right, tell Jim, can this work in college basketball?
Well, I don't know about. I just don't know how they could afford to be off campus for that period of time. In terms of the guys being safe and having a great environment, if you could have a great environment without fans to play, yeah, it's excellent. I mean, you feel so secure. I was scared to come down here. I don't want to put words in Pop's mouth, but Pop and I are 71. Bo's about 91. I don't even know how old Bo is, but the older guys are supposedly at risk. When you get down here, you felt honestly incredibly safe. It does. Hey, Seth, it's better than not playing at all. I mean, I'm terrified what's happening. I live in Seattle. Mike Hopkins, Bo's old guy, Pac-12s has already pushed back to January 1. My son's going to be a senior in high school. Like, I'm worried whether they're going to play. So, yeah, it's great if you can be away from campus for, and I think they're talking about doing it like, when you would be in Maui or be, in a tournament. The bubble's a great environment. It's really strange without the fans, but our guys have taken to it. But guess what? They knew this was the only way they were going to get to play for a championship and get paid. So it's working down here, no question.
Well, could you do pods, Jim? Jim, do you think you can do
pods?
I
don't think we can do that. I don't think we can do that. We can't do the scale they can do. Even if we went to a pod, there's going to be too many outside influences. The best thing we can do, we try to isolate our players on campus as much as we can, and we've been testing for 8 weeks, and we've had, knock on wood, no positives. We have to play kind of in a bubble, no fans, maybe a few fans, but we have to charter to the game we play, and if somebody's playing us, they have to charter here or take a bus, and we have to have at least almost daily testing by that time. I mean, they're going to test 3 times a week, but we could get to rapid testing. I think from the doctors, we could get to daily testing. And if we could get to daily testing and isolate our players as much as we can and play teams that are testing like we are and maybe get started early just so that if there's some lapse in there, you can still make up the games. And then you can get to play 26 games or 24. We might not get 31 in, but we could get 24, 5, 6 games in. But we're going to have to be tested, and we're going to have to isolate, and our players are going to have to be smart. Hey, Duke brought 15,000 students back. They've had like 7 or 8 tests positive. We've had 20, and we have 12,000 students done it. So it can be done. It's not going to be easy. There probably will be some breakouts, but we've had 1,000 football players test positive, and all 1,000 of them are back playing football. So I think we can keep them safe. I think they're safer with us than they are at home. And I think they're safer playing than they are just on campus. Without that opportunity to play, they might lapse and go out.
Right.
So I think we can do it. We can't do the NBA. That obviously that's worked perfectly, but baseball travels around the country. They've had a couple teams struggle, but they have 27 teams that have not had any problems. Soccer's playing around. We'll see.
Yeah, Pete.
Seth, I'll tell you one kid they got to not let home is Buddy Boeheim. They got to keep him at school. He does not want to be home with his father. I guarantee you that.
He's happy with the isolation at school.
But I think our exempt events in November, if they're talking about that after Thanksgiving, I can see all the exempt events that like we do at ESPN going into Orlando. And now all of a sudden you have everything in place. I think Dan Gavitt's been great because he's been patient. He's obviously has some sort of plan, and he's going to create some type of protocol that will hold everyone accountable so that teams can play each other, because you're not going to risk having your team play a low division if they don't have the same protocol. And I think he's been brilliant.
And I think he's brilliant. I think that he's listening to coaches. We're talking to him, and there's going to be a plan. That's what we saw in football. There was no plan, and people went their individual ways, and I just don't think it was right. I think college football was doing good. The players were doing good. They were tested negatively, and all of a sudden the scare came up, and there was panic. I think you have to have a plan. We're working on a plan. We still have a lot of work to do. And you can't say as of right now in September, like you couldn't say in July. You're going to have to wait till closer, October, mid-October maybe, to really know that you can go. And I'm hopeful we can. We'll have another 4 or 5 weeks of testing underway and done, and just see where we are. I think it's better to do that than to just give up and say we're not playing. We're not playing until January. We're not playing until February.
I think earlier the better. As soon as students
why is it going to be better? Why does the Big Ten think it's going to be better to play in the spring? They're doing the testing now. They have all that done. Why is it going? There's not going to be a vaccine in January or February. I've talked to multiple doctors. I mean, they're think it's optimistic if we have a proven vaccine late next year. And even that, 50% of the people take the flu shot. How many people are going to take the vaccine? Who knows?
PJ, life in the bubble. How good has this basketball been? Because Boeheim's watched every single game. All right. He had this one game. But I mean, like last night, Nuggets, Jazz, they looked tired, but partially I thought defensively, they were really good. They didn't look tired defensively.
They played. It was game 7. It was a little tougher. Guys that were floating easy in the first 6 games, it got a little tougher game 7 when you go home. I mean, that's the one thing. The only time the NBA really resembles in terms of that sudden death is a game 7 or the last game of the year. The NCAA, as you guys well know, you win or you go home. And that affected. I thought that affected a lot of people last night. I do think the defense was much better. I've really been surprised, Seth. The play was much better than I thought after 4 months off. Obviously, the resting helped. The offense has been good. The shooting's really well. I think the one thing guys must have done a lot of was shoot the ball, and the percentages and the way they're shooting the 3 is unbelievable. And I hate to say it, they got nothing else to do here. I mean, they practice, shoot around, or play. I mean, these guys are fishing in the lakes at Disney and golfing, the guys who like to golf. That's it. So, I mean, the focus is really good. There's no travel. I mean, it's so different than the situations they're accustomed to. And I probably should have anticipated, but I didn't. The level of ball has been much better, much sooner than I would have thought.
Well, the shooting, one thing with the shooting, when we go to Maui, when we go to in Orlando, the backgrounds, they're used to the big arenas, which are a little harder. Let's face it. In those backgrounds like that, I was going to ask you, I would say the shooting percentages must be up 5-10%. I mean,
Unbelievable. Yeah, incredibly.
We are shooting 51% from three at Maui the 3 times we've been there. 51%. Those teams shot 34% in the regular season. It's different background.
Yeah, you're right. They've made it very nice. I mean, it's really crazy how, like, what they've done virtually and what it looks like. But the players from day one have said that there used to be 3. We're down to 2 arenas now. Seth, you know them, or Bo, you do. I think they play. Is that where they play the tournaments at 1 or 2 of these places? But again, there's nobody behind the baskets. It's just set up. They have the screen. It's really not. I guess it's ideal. I could never shoot. You 2 guys could both shoot. So players are liking it for sure.
No, Brad can shoot. I can shoot. If Marcus Smart's knocking down 4 threes in a row,
something's wrong.
And if Jimmy Butler's knocking down 40, I mean, like, so here's my question. All right, you got Milwaukee, you got the Heat. Everyone says obviously the Heat set their defense. The Heat are going to do a good job of taking away driving lanes. They have versatility defensively, all that stuff. Is that a really good matchup for Milwaukee? Or is that, Milwaukee had 1 day to prepare, no Bledsoe. What do you guys think?
They should still win. They need Bledsoe. They should still win. They have a deeper team. Chris Middleton's got to play, and I think he will. I thought he played decently. He's got to play. Miami's really good, but I think they're counting on those young guys, and I think eventually that catches up with them. But it's not a good matchup at all. Jimmy Butler played out of his mind. It better not be close, though, Seth, because if Giannis is on the free throw line, that is not a good thing for the Bucks.
Coach Boeheim, I know you've watched every single minute of every single game.
The shooting is really his shooting down the stretcher in the game is a big problem. And Miami moves the ball for me better than anybody. They get those guys that can shoot shots.
They get good looks. Yep.
And Jimmy Butler's playing at a high level. I think Miami's going to be hard to beat. And if Giannis doesn't make shots, I think it's a big problem for Milwaukee. If he gets 18 points and 10 rebounds, they're not winning. They're not winning against Miami, and they're playing the zone wall back in there, zone defense, really waiting back in there. And either he's making shots or some other guys are going to have to make a lot of shots or they're going to have to get out. And it's hard to get out on Miami because they run good stuff and they get good shots. So it's hard to get out.
If they don't turn them over and defend them so they can get up and down the floor, they got to play against Miami's set defense most of the time. That's not good.
You know, Seth, I'd like to bring up one thing here, and you should know this. You should be talking about this. You know, Milwaukee did a great thing. The NBA did a great thing, and they stepped out. They walked out to protest. And they wanted the Wisconsin legislature to meet, right? That was a focus of it.
Sure.
And from what I read this morning, I might be wrong on this now, they met for 30 minutes and then adjourned. Is that possible? In other words, can you affect change? I mean,
no, change is a process.
Right? I don't think you can do anything more than what Milwaukee did and what the NBA did to say, hey, let's do something. And the legislature met for 30 minutes. That was it. I mean,
did they have a response after the meeting like this is how we're going to start, or this is the process we're going to go through, or is this what we're trying? Like to me, the whole thing is conversations are great, but if conversations aren't solution-based conversations, then they're just people talking to each other. They've got to be solution-based conversations, and they've got to have a short, middle, and long-term plan. And that's the biggest problem is we can't make things happen right away, but we can make things happen if we continue the conversations. And again, I didn't see exactly what happened, but what the NBA did, it basically, and it wasn't just the NBA because they were basically the start of Major League Baseball and Major League Soccer and what else. Now, where's the follow-up? It's like anything else, like we talk about in practice, repetition. If you put good days on top of each other, good things happen. Well, all these legislators and all these politicians and all these different groups, we've got to figure out a way to put good days on top of each other, or we are, as a society, in a terrible, terrible place.
Terrible.
And again, I didn't know about the length of that meeting, but something has got to change.
I think that they just try to push it down the road, and they've been trying to push it down the road for years. This is nothing new. They talk about it, going to do something, and then it's down the road, and people forget. I don't think we can forget this. I think we can stop with this. Something has to be done, and voting is one thing. Yes, we have to all vote. We have to vote people in who will affect change. It's hard sometimes to know who is going to do that, but we have to, and we something has to change in this country, and it isn't changing. It hasn't changed from the beginning of this year to now. Things still happen. Everybody's upset about it. Something has to get done about it, and it doesn't feel like they're doing anything.
PJ, what's the mood? I mean, you're living in Seattle. Just real quickly, I don't want to get too deep into this, but what is the feeling in your city in Portland that it's just so volatile right now?
Well, I tell you, our city's getting a little bit of Portland even is to an extent. There's more going on in Portland. Our place got a ton of publicity because of CHOP, because they had that zone. And the city made a mistake. They gave up the precinct, which was a bad thing to do. Our city council and our mayor are at each other. The city council is not real good. And they took the police chief and they reduced her salary by 40% in the middle of the year. She resigned the next day. She's very good. The mayor's very good. All that was going on in Seattle, it was really confined to a relatively small area. Seattle's a very liberal city. They're all on board with the change. They're really going after the police department, probably a little more in terms of price reduction, budget reduction than they should. But Seattle's okay. Portland's pretty much every night. I'll tell you what, it's, again, you talk to our friends in Portland, a lot of the people who work for Nike, really good friends of Jim's and mine. Again, it's localized, it's downtown, it's by the federal building and the courthouse, the Hatfield Center. I lived in Portland for 3 years. We've been in Seattle for 13 now. It's over dramatized on TV. It's not good, but it's not the extent you would think in Seattle. Portland, I haven't been there. The people in Portland say they're all right, but there's a lot of outside people there also, Seth, to be honest. There's a lot of people that aren't Portland people involved in these protests, and that's where it gets really difficult. And of course, it was ridiculous when they had all the federal troops in there, and that probably exacerbated the situation. But the news media is loving that city because there's B-roll for them every night, but it probably isn't as bad as you would imagine.
Well, Jim, that's a great point to put up. We like I'm sure you heard it, Jim. We start every single show with that. I always use 3 words: humanity, compassion, and caring. If we can ever get to a point as a society where we just have respect, whether it's racial, religious, professional, and just everyone, like, I have these Zoom calls with my former players. I've been doing it now for, I guess about 5 months now that I come think of it. And their biggest thing is they always want to walk away every single day with one thing to take away from it. And their one thing has always been, what can I do to impact someone in a positive way every day? And if each one of us can do that every day, how much better a place we would be. Now, we've got to get society politically, people doing the right thing for we always say the good of the group, for the good of the group. And Jim, I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen, but the conversations have to be solution based. The conversations have to continue, and that people have got to have a mindset of, we're not fixing this in one meeting. We're not fixing this. Is let's put good days on top of each other, but approach every single day with a sense of purpose to impact the situation in a positive way. And that's about the only way I think we can get through this in a positive way.
I agree.
Yeah, but hey, I appreciate you guys coming on, and Jim, I appreciate you bringing that up. And I just think it's so important that we celebrate and pay tribute to. Think about it. We lost Coach Massimino. We lost Coach Henson. We lost obviously Coach Thompson, Coach Olson. I mean, and I said this the other day in a conversation, like there'll be next generation that doesn't understand the bridges those guys built for them. And I think it's really important that we make sure we let people understand the tremendous that it wasn't always like it is today. Like you think about the way you guys used to recruit. PJ, I always talk about that trip to the McDonald's game in Philadelphia. We didn't have enough money for the tolls. All right. So now when I can't get on a plane and fly to go recruiting, he loses his mind. You remember that trip, PJ?
I remember it very well.
He's at Wagner. I'm at Columbia. We decided to go to the McDonald's game.
No, I remember buying dinner for both of you every time we were out. And you just said,
as you should.
That's all I remember.
I don't remember that at all. Hey, Seth, by the way, if you ever invite me to this again, let me know who the other guests are, all right? Don't take that away from me. That's not fair.
I begged them to put you on. It's the only reason you got on. Please.
Hey, appreciate you guys. Stay safe. And PJ, we'll look forward to listening to you. Coach Boeheim, again, I appreciate everything you did. And Jackie G, appreciate you also. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, hello to George, Bo.
You got
shoot 100. Go shoot 100.
I will.